This is the Architect Exam Podcast with architect Michael Rosica, the official podcast of the Young Architect Academy.
Hey guys, what's up? I'm Michael Rosica, and welcome back to the Architect Exam Podcast. Today, I want to dive deep into probably one of the most misunderstood and hotly debated topics, and that is who creates the punch list? Now, let me tell you, I have been running the ARE Facebook group for the past 10 years, and this is probably one of the most heated debates that we see consistently over and over and over again about who's actually responsible for creating punch lists. I feel like I have watched people almost punch each other debating about who creates the punch list. But here's the thing. I think a lot of people always just assume that the architect creates the punch list because they themselves have a lot of experience looking at the built work and creating punch lists with contractors and the owner and all this other stuff. And I do too as well. But here's the deal. Brace yourself. It's actually the contractor's responsibility to create the punch list. Yep. The contractor, not the architect, is the one who officially puts the punch list together. And today I'm going to unpack exactly why that is. But to really get us there, we've got to understand another really critical piece of the puzzle, and that is substantial completion. So why substantial completion? Well, punch lists and substantial completion actually go hand in hand with each other. You can't really fully grasp one without the other. So let me help you understand substantial completion, and let's start really simple. What exactly is it? What is substantial completion? So at its core, substantial completion is that moment in a construction project when the building can safely and effectively be used for its intended purpose, even if there's still a handful of minor things that are left unfinished. Now, I did some research, and let me give you the official AIA definition of substantial completion. They say that it's the stage in the progress of the work when the work or designated portion, therefore, is sufficiently complete in accordance with the contract documents so that the owner can occupy or utilize the work for its intended use. So that's what the AIA has to say it is. But let me give you an analogy to really help drive home kind of the concept of substantial completion. So imagine you're baking a cake for a really big birthday party. You've done your research, you found the proper recipe that you want to use, you bake the cake, you decorated it, and it's sitting there on the table looking delicious, but it's still missing the candles. Now, is that cake ready for the party? Of course it is. Those candles are basically your punch list of items. It's the tiny little details that you can easily fix or add later, but they won't stop anyone from enjoying the cake right now. Substantial completion has some big impacts on your project, and once you hit that milestone, several important things also happen. The responsibility shifts. The owner takes over utilities, insurance, and other essentials. The warranties actually kick in. This is when the clock starts ticking on your warranties. The payment milestones get triggered, retainage starts getting released, and everyone begins to wrap things up financially. And critically, substantial completion marks the start of certain legal deadlines like liens and warranties and statutes of limitation. All of these start ticking at substantial completion. I hope that shines a little bit of light on substantial completion. And now let's transition over to talking about punch lists. Now, to be clear, you can't have substantial completion without dealing with a punch list of some sort. It's a crucial step in actually confirming substantial completion. So now that we've defined what substantial completion means, let's break down exactly what the punch list is, how it's used, why there's so much confusion about who actually creates it. And we talked earlier, most folks immediately assume it's the architect, right? But let's clear this up once and for all. It's actually the contractor. That's right. The contractor is officially responsible for creating that initial punch list. And the reason is actually very straightforward when you think about it. Guys, contractors are the ones living and breathing the project every single day. They know all the hidden details, the stuff behind the walls, beneath the floors, above the ceilings, that the architect may never catch during their periodic visits. Sure, the architects are great for spotting details, but the contractor has the continuous daily oversight of the job site. They're managing the trades, scheduling deliveries, and seeing firsthand every little hiccup or unfinished piece of work. Now, don't take my word for it. This responsibility is actually spelled out in the A201 section 9.8.2, and this is what it says. When the contractor considers that the work or portion thereof, which the owner agrees to accept separately, is substantially complete, the contractor shall prepare and submit to the architect a comprehensive list of items to be completed or corrected prior to final payment. Failure to include an item on such list does not alter the responsibility of the contractor to complete all work in accordance with contract documents. There you have it. It's A201 9.8.2. And it doesn't stop there, actually. If the project is deemed to be substantially complete by the owner and the architect, what would happen next is there's a certificate of substantial completion. It's the AIA document G704. And the G704 has an entire section dedicated to work to be completed or corrected. Here, they would list the items to be completed or corrected and basically attach the contractor's punch list to the certificate of substantial completion. It also asks, how long is it going to take to finish these things? What's the cost of work to be completed? And yes, kind of basically acknowledges that there is still work to be completed, but the project is substantially complete.
You're listening to the Architect Exam Podcast, your guide to passing the ARE.
Hey there, this is Michael, and I have a quick favor to ask. If you're finding value in this free ARE podcast, please take a second to follow, like, subscribe, and leave a review or a comment on whatever platform you happen to hear this podcast. Your engagement lets us know that people are actually listening, and it inspires us to keep creating more podcast episodes. But honestly, what matters most to me isn't the likes or the follows. It's sharing this podcast with others who need it. When I was studying for my exams years ago, I felt completely alone and everyone was hoarding information instead of helping each other out. And it was that frustration that led me to start Young Architect back in 2014 with a simple mission: help the next generation of architects become the most successful generation of architects. So please share this podcast with your colleagues, friends, or anyone tackling their AREs. By sharing knowledge, we all rise together. All right, back to the podcast. Now, to help you better understand, substantial completion and punch list and all these things, I ended up creating a step-by-step process of how all these pieces go down. And I really want to slow it down and break out exactly what happens during the punch list process. As the project gets close to the finish line, the contractor reaches out to the architect, and it's usually in writing. And it says, "Hey, dude, I think we're ready for a substantial completion. Can we schedule the walkthrough?" And then they'd set up a meeting with the owner, the architect, and contractor. And I'd say before that meeting happens, the contractor would produce the initial punch list. So then all the parties get together, they show up at the right time, they have that meeting, and they closely review the contractor's punch list together. And together as a group, they take the drawings and specs and they walk through the entire project. And this is where the confusion is the architect now adds to the contractor's punch list. They add more things to it. They say, "Hey, wait a minute, this thing was installed upside down. There's a scuff in the paint mark right here." And the architect probably, they either add to it or they make their own punch list on top of it. But it always starts with the contractor producing the initial punch list. And after the walkthrough, it's the architect's decision to make that important call. Is the project substantially complete or not? If the answer is no, this process starts all over again. The contractor fixes what's necessary and you go through the whole punch list process all over again. But if it is, the architect issues that certificate of substantial completion. And at that point, the owner officially takes responsibility over the property, except for the remaining punch list items, which stay under the contractor's responsibility. And once the contractor finishes those punch list items, the owner and the architect check and verify that they're completed properly. And then after all the work's been verified as being satisfactory completed, usually the retainage that's been held back is released and the project is done. Now, one of the points I want to hammer home and drive back is that, the reason why the architect doesn't create the initial punch list is the architect's not on the job site every day. The architect doesn't know about all those little screws that were missing in the windows or all these little details of all of this stuff. It's the contractor's job to say, "Hey, this is what's left over. This project, from my opinion, is substantially complete. Let's have this meeting. Let's look it over. Let me tell you about all the hidden things that you'll never find by looking at the project." And then the architect and the owner review the contractor's list and make their own punch list or add on top of it. Really, the architect adds to the initial punch list. They don't create the initial punch list. All right. And I know your next question. What if it's determined that there was stuff missing on the punch list or the work's not, complete or there's an issue? That brings us into the realm of what's called the 1-year period for correction of work. And I'm not going to read it to you, but I'll tell you where it is in the A201 if you want to go look it up. It's at section 12.2.2. You can go read that. But basically it says if anything defective pops up within 1 year after substantial completion, it's the contractor's job to return to the project, fix it. And as long as the owner notifies the contractor promptly about that, the correction period is specifically for catching or fixing defects that reveal themselves quickly after completion. I think a good example of this would be that, they put a new it's a brand new building. It's got a brand new roof on it, but until it's gone through a couple of different rainstorms, we don't know if there's any leaks in it, and that happens on projects. The 1-year correction period, it's typically different from the warranties, which usually cover materials and workmanship over that's the long-term stretch of time, which is years depending on the contract. Next, let me share with you some best practices for managing your punch list. I've done a lot of punch lists from the architect side, from the owner side, and here's some tips to make managing your punch list a lot more easier. First, I'd say don't wait until the very end. Do frequent and ongoing inspections throughout the project. I kind of think of these as almost like rolling punch lists. I would take really good notes on things that I saw were just flat out wrong. This thing was installed upside down. There's a scuff in the paint here. And every time I visited the site, I would take notes on things that needed to be fixed or corrected. And sometimes it would make its way into the field reports, and sometimes it wouldn't. I always took really good pictures of everything, even videos. I would walk through the site with my iPhone and just record everything that had been done that's new, just keeping really good track of things. I even had a situation where the contractor gave me his punch list and said, "Hey, Wan, I was on the site like 3 days ago and I saw all these things. Can you please revisit this and resend this initial punch list back to us?" So just keeping track. The more you keep track of things, the easier and faster and better the whole punch list process will go. All right, let's bring this home and wrap this up. Why does understanding substantial completion and punch list really matter? Well, you got to be clear about these two things. It can save you a lot of headache. It prevents disputes. It keeps you out of legal troubles. It avoids financial strain, and it ensures a smoother project closeout. And again, recognizing clearly that the contractor is responsible for the punch list. It's explicitly stated in the AIA, and I'm even going to add, it's just common sense. The contractor is the one who is living and breathing that construction site and knows more than anyone else anything that is incomplete. The architect should not be showing up without that data in their hand and determining what is and isn't complete. It really helps everyone stay aligned with reducing misunderstandings and conflicts. All right, so thanks for diving deep and talking about punch lists and substantial completion. Remember that clarity is everything. Always refer back to what the contract says. It's the guidebook of getting through your projects without chaos.
Thanks for listening to the Architect Exam Podcast. Ready to take your studying to the next level? Visit our online ARE Architecture School website at academy.youngarchitect.com to learn more about how we can help you. See you next time.